If you're a die-hard audiophile, or maybe just one who's a little long in the tooth, the whole concept of a high-end wireless speaker system might be a difficult pill to swallow. But equally, if you're a Sonos customer, maybe looking to massively level up your home audio, maybe the idea of wires, boxes and hi-fi racks is equally as difficult to digest. So therein lies a quandary. How do you please both of those customers? Well, that is exactly what I think Dynaudio have tried to do with their new Focus range of speakers. And interestingly, in the main, I think offer a pleasing solution to both is exactly what they have done. I have been reviewing the largest speaker in the Focus range, the Focus 50 that you can see there behind me. And regulars to this channel will remember me naming them as my best hi-fi products of 2022. And that lofty mantle I gave to them for multifaceted reasons really, but it's because they fill that gap so well. And I think at the moment, at least, they offer quite a unique proposition within the hi-fi market. I also, at the end of last year, visited Dynaudio's factory in Denmark and got to see the Focus speakers being built. But more importantly, I spent several days with Dynaudio's chief engineer, Stephen Entwistle, who gave me a lot of extra insight into the Focus speakers design, and I can appreciate them more as a result of that. Some of that insight you will be able to see for yourself in the video I created for my visit. And Dynaudio are a very impressive hi-fi manufacturer with the Jupiter speaker measurement system that's literally out of this world, excuse the pun, and they make all their own drivers and more. And I will happily admit that had the Focus speakers not featured Dirac live room correction, well then they definitely wouldn't have been so interesting to me. In fact, I probably would have overlooked them as not being for me, which would have been a huge mistake. And the reason for that is because of the whole concept of a wireless high-end speaker system. I still struggle with that today, and I don't know why, because wireless technology forms a huge part of our everyday lives. In fact, you're probably watching this video using a wireless device, and I'm totally fine with that. But for a high-end hi-fi system, I still struggle with that concept. Of course, I know a lot of you won't see that the same as me. But I have some great news for you. If you're a die-hard audiophile who looks at it in the same vein as I do, well then I would actually look at the Focus 50 more as streaming active speakers rather than wireless, because you can connect them together with wires and you can connect them to your network with wires as well. And that is actually how you'll get the best sound quality from them. And we'll talk about that shortly. And there are lots of technical and usability benefits to a streaming active speaker. But before we go there, the Focus 50, they are quite a large floor standing speaker in terms of their height, but their floor space footprint is not very large, thanks to quite a small footstand design that the installation of forms a very satisfying part of the unboxing experience. And at this price point, your hi-fi dealer will likely deliver the speakers to you and possibly unbox them and set them up for you, which in a way is a shame, because I think your ownership appreciation of them will start with that unboxing experience as you're gently trying to kind of, slide the speakers out of the box. You're very much up close and personal with them, very hands-on, and very quickly you kind of get a great sense of the build quality and the solidity of the speakers. And then you remove the foam and you install the 4 feet design, which is really easy and really simple. And kudos to Dynaudio for making it that easy and simple. But as you're doing all that, you definitely start to just get a feeling of appreciation again for the build quality and the solidity. And I think the speakers weigh 33 and a bit kilos each, so they're solid, they're heavy, and the die-hard audiophile will definitely appreciate that. But for the visuals, there's not really too much to talk about here. In white, these are very understated looking speakers that I think blend modern and traditional very well, but there is no real visual character to speak of, especially with the grills on. But removing the grills is bound to get the die-hard audiophile excited with the three-way DSP-controlled Dynaudio drivers. The 1.5-inch Seritar tweeter that has Hexis technology for better performance, a dedicated MSP almost 6-inch mid-range driver, and dual MSP 7-inch bass drivers, with all of this being driven by 3 studio-grade amplifiers totaling 600 watts per speaker. And one thing that I found very interesting is that the Focus 50 are a sealed design, which probably makes them more flexible for their placement, which will be great news for many. Another huge thing for the Sonos customer is the flexibility and ease of use. The Dynaudio app I really like because it's simple, very easy to use and understand what everything does. There is no fancy swiping going on, but I prefer the more simplistic options and menu system. And because I connected to the Focus 50 using a LAN cable, everything was pretty much ready to go for me straight away. So within less than 5 minutes, I had music playing from Tidal using Tidal Connect. But you can stream music to them in so many ways, using AirPlay, Bluetooth, Spotify Connect, and UPnP, which is great. But for a more feature-rich experience, I'm sure the die-hard audiophile will appreciate them having Roon support. And you can connect other sources to the primary of the 2 speakers. On the rear, you have several digital and a single analog connection for maybe connecting a turntable's phono stage. And you can also connect devices wirelessly to the Focus speakers using the built-in WiSA technology. But I will admit, I haven't connected any other sources to the Focus 50. It's all been streaming music from the cloud for me. But there is one important, well, possibly important connection or connectivity option missing, and that is HDMI, which is a pretty big omission in 22/23. But again, that WiSA technology will allow you to connect devices that you would normally use HDMI to the Focus speakers wirelessly. I think you would just need to use what's called a sound send device to create that link between them. So while this is not necessarily ideal, I definitely don't see it as the end of the world, and it definitely would not put me off the Focus speakers given everything else, and especially given their sound quality. And listening to one of my favourite albums, this is Lady Blackbird Black Acid Soul, the deluxe edition. Because with the deluxe edition, there's at least 4 really good extra tracks that you don't get with the original album. And of course, this is the vinyl. I wasn't listening to the vinyl. In fact, the rapper's still on this one. I was listening to the album streamed from Tidal. But I really enjoyed, I loved actually listening to this album through the Focus 50 because of the spatial imagery and more. And it's because listening to this album through these speakers was a real experience. And I think that's why you have a high-end hi-fi system. It's because it makes music not just something that you sit and listen to, it's something that you sit and experience. For the Focus 50's sound quality, the first thing I noticed about them was their general overall presentation, which is a really nice mixture of being quite easygoing and relaxed, but also with very good climbing, very good information, a very informative presentation. So for me, it's like a nice mixture of Dynaudio's studio speaker heritage and that type of sound mixed with some very big, pleasing overtones. So I'm sure that sounds to you like a very nice sonic mixture, excuse the pun. And this does make music overall sound a little more relaxed for the better in a lot of ways. But sometimes I did find myself seeking a little more overall sonic resolution. But I think a lot of people would find the Focus 50 deliver a very natural sounding presentation because it's that little bit more relaxed. But interestingly, this highlights another of the benefits of a DSP active speaker, because in the app you can adjust the frequency balance of the speakers between dark, neutral and bright. And I didn't really get on so well with the dark option, which rolls off the treble and raises the bass some. I like the bass lift, but not so much the rest. But the majority of the time I definitely listen to the speakers in the neutral mode because it is very balanced. But at those times when I was finding maybe things were a little bit just too relaxed for me, or maybe the treble was just a little softer than I would have liked, well, that's where it's great to be able to engage the bright mode because it just livens the sound up a little bit. But I couldn't listen to the bright mode for everything. A great example would be Freya Ryding's new album, which I think is called Blood Orange. That's mixed very kind of modern, quite hot, and that's where the neutral mode just works really so well. But I just like the fact that I haven't even got to get up. I can just use the app, adjust the sound profile to fit, my taste for that particular album. And this is not the same as tone controls. This is like a key change in the speaker's behavior, which is much better than tone controls. And the treble from the Focus 50 I liked a lot because it's informative. The details are all there, but they don't want to shout them at you. It's a smooth in the main treble, but I could find it to be a little too smooth at times, like I mentioned before. So in this instance, I could just use the bright option for a little more energy in the highs. But I can see why Dynaudio have tuned the neutral setting to be as it is, because in music where the treble energy is mixed hot or where there's some very obvious sibilance, the bright mode will just bring that out and just make you aware of it. A little bit too much, really. It wasn't shouting that information at you, but it was just making you more aware of it. Whereas the neutral mode, I think, just smooths that off really nicely, which makes listening to a wide variety of music stream from the cloud, which varies massively in quality, as we all know. It just makes listening to a broader selection of music just that bit more pleasing. And then an album I used to test vocals is Cold to Walls Songs of the Plains. It's not necessarily the best recorded album, it's just got a lot of character and spatial information. And the spatial bits the Focus 50 did great, and the vocals in this album sounded big. They just hung in the centre of the soundstage with a nice amount of space. And I really liked that. I liked the scale of the vocals, and I also liked the kind of upper reaches of the vocals and how that information came through. And it was a very smoothly delivered vocals, which I also liked, especially as it wasn't so smooth to become kind of flat and boring or lacking subtlety. The opposite, there was subtlety there. Nice amount of detail and all important character. But I would say that it's not necessarily, the highest resolution or the most extreme resolution of vocal that I've had in this room before. Again, it's more of that pleasing kind of character to them. And then switching over to other albums like maybe Freya Ryding's or Norah Jones, maybe some Passenger. The vocals were delivered in that same ilk with smoothness, gracefulness, a nice amount of detail, and just, generally very pleasing. Not extreme resolution, but very, very pleasing. And one thing that stands out to me about how Dynaudio designed their speakers is that they appreciate the importance of bass. And their speakers seem to give you more bass than you expect from them, which I always really, really appreciate. And that is totally true for the dual 7-inch bass drivers in the Focus 50. And if you place them correctly in the room, they can deliver a lot of bass output with fantastic extension. And in the main, the bass is tight and controlled and comes across with grace and smoothness. But also with some of that kind of kick, that tactile kick that everybody enjoys. In the app, you can engage some bass management, and you could send the bass to a subwoofer if you wanted to. But in this room, I felt absolutely no need to use a subwoofer. In fact, the extension when I measured the speakers using Dirac Live was really extremely impressive, as was the output. And on that, when I think back to a lot of the speakers that I've had in this listening room over maybe the last year, I think the Dynaudios are up there as being the most pleasing to me, the most satisfying to me for their bass delivery, for the output, the amount of output, how tight and controlled it is, how tactile, that feeling, that bass pressure feeling that you get. I would put them up there as easily in the top 3. And then coming back to what I said earlier about looking at these as streaming active speakers more than streaming wireless active speakers. And yes, you can use them wirelessly and they sound great. You don't ever once think about the fact that they are wirelessly connected together. And there are 2 different profile modes to choose from in the app, either 48 kilohertz and 96 kilohertz. So this is the connection between the speakers. And this does change the fundamental behavior of the speaker. So there will be a slight difference in sound. But I would guess if you're considering spending nearly £9,000 on a streaming active wireless maybe speaker system, well then you're doing so because you want the sound quality, you want the best sound quality. And to get the best from the Focus 50, well then you need to connect the speakers together using an SPDIF digital cable. And this is not kind of snake oil, audiophile snake oil foolery, whatever some people call it. This is kind of a fundamental thing that links the two speakers together. I think it's a 192 kilohertz connection then. It just brings out the best of the speakers. And I heard quite a significant improvement connecting them together with the cable. I heard the music become more solid and more sure-footed, more rich in tonality, which is a big one actually. And because everything was kind of solid and more well-defined, that created more space, even more space still within the soundstage. And overall, to me, the Focus 50 just sounded more high-end. So for me, this was a big difference. So my advice would be, if you want to get the best sound quality from the speakers, yes, they still sound great wirelessly, but if you connect them with a cable, that will be how you get the very best from them. Talking about hearing the Focus 50 at their best. Now I get to speak about their feature that excites me the most, and that is Dirac Live room correction. And of course I might be biased, but I think Dirac Live is the best room correction solution available to us as audiophiles today. And that is for two reasons really. The firstly is because the technicals behind it are extremely impressive, and of course that is essential, but really it's because it's not an overly automated system. It still puts me in control. I am in control of the sound. And with the Focus 50, I was able to fine-tune their sound in this room to achieve a much better overall result. And that is because we're dealing with the speaker room interaction. Every room, based on its physical size, its physical makeup, where the speakers are in the room and where you sit in the room, will affect the sound that we hear. And Dynaudio have done an amazing job of creating an ultra flexible speaker with the Focus 50. But because of physics, you place them in a room, the room affects how they sound. It is unavoidable. And interestingly for me, I have spent months actually fine-tuning the perfect spot in this room. You can see kind of the blue taped squares-ish that you can see there behind me. And those have moved around the room as I've measured over a period of months with lots of different speakers. And in this room, I have more acoustic treatment than most studios. But despite all of that, things are still not perfect. But you can put speakers down in that blue square, those blue squares behind me, and they will sound fantastic, but they're still far from perfect. And that is where Dirac Live really comes in. And I doubt you will find anyone more experienced with it than me in the field. So what could I do with it? Well, most notably was in the bass, because bass is the area where we have the most problems, especially in smaller rooms. And like I said, the bass from the Focus 50 is fantastic, but using Dirac Live, I was able to tidy up the bass some, make it clearer, make the notes more clear and well defined. But more impressive than that was bass notes would play and then decay in a more linear fashion. And as bass notes were shifting up and down in frequency, I was able to use Dirac Live to make them sound more clear and also more linear. And these two things sound like small differences, but trust me, they're not. They're big differences. And because I could use Dirac Live to just clean up some of the excess bass, the pockets of bass that were too hot around my listening area, that meant there was more clarity in the overall soundstage, less kind of lingering, less bass lingering, putting itself on the rest of the sound, opened up the soundstage more, made the spatial imaging that bit better. But they also meant that there was less of a softening going on for the vocals. So vocals were now clearer because they were in more space. They also popped off of the background more. So they were a little bit more upfront, more how I like them to be. So a little bit less soft, but clearer and a bit more present and a bit more upfront. And for me, I find that more engaging. And now the treble was bang on where I wanted it to be. No longer did I feel I needed to change the treble. In fact, I didn't feel like I needed to change anything. The sound to me was absolutely not perfect, because it never is, but damn impressive. And another thing that was really impressive was the width imaging, which in here, as you can see, I had to have the focus quite close to the sidewalls. But with the Dirac Live correction, the sound that comes outside of the speakers was larger, bigger in tone, clearer to hear, and that just extended the soundstage out to the sides much more. So for me, all of these things are a really big improvement. In order to use Dirac Live, the Focus speaker owner does need to buy a license, and the total cost of one and buying the all-important measurement microphone, I think will come in to around 5% of the speaker's cost. But I think if you're able to maybe make a 10% improvement to the sound you're getting from the Focus speakers in your room, well then that for a 5% cost of the speakers, I think actually is fantastic value, because normally you would have to spend a lot more money than that to see that kind of a 10% improvement. And I think that's being modest. I think in some rooms you'll hear a much bigger improvement than that. So yeah, for me, it's like a great feature about the Focus speakers. I mean, I love Dirac Live anyway. I love what it does, and I love what I can do with it. But for me, it's a standout feature for the Focus range of speakers. I want to wrap up this very long review, and I know it's very long, but I want it to be thorough on purpose, because I think if you're considering spending this much money, £8,699 on the Focus 50, that is a lot of hi-fi money. So what do we actually get for that money? Well, a lot actually. And this is where the value proposition, I think, becomes very interesting, because we're getting good speakers, 6 very good amplifiers, DACs, streaming flexibility, DSP, Dirac Live room correction. Yes, there's a bit of an additional cost for that, but it's still built into the product. But the bit that stands out that goes with all of that is the flexibility and ease of use. And at my stage in my life, where I work lots and lots of hours a week, I've got young children, all of these time demands, if I wasn't a hi-fi reviewer, I think I would find it very difficult to find a lot of time for a high-end hi-fi system where you're constantly maybe playing with components and everything that goes into that. The idea and the concept of all of it being in the speaker, and having your room back, you're having much more space in your room with the ease and flexibility of that. But still, when I have a listening session, every single listening session, I would need it to be really good sound. That is what the Focus 50 can deliver. So when I think about that, the multifaceted aspect of that, and how that can appeal and will appeal to diehard audiophiles, and can and will appeal to Sonos customers or someone coming from that more lifestyle approach looking to level up their sound. Well, that is where the overall package of the Focus 50 really stands out. And yes, there are some, I think, implications, maybe some limitations to a speaker system like this. But I think the pros very much outweigh the cons. That is the reason why I claimed them or named them as my best hi-fi product of 2022. They fit that gap so well. And I actually think they are the hi-fi future product that the hi-fi industry's future needs. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. I know some of you have waited a long time for it. I hope you found it useful. I hope you found it helpful. If you enjoy my take on hi-fi reviewing, please hit the thumbs up button, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks for watching. Take care.